familiar faces, so thank you so much for joining us this afternoon as we talk about economic opportunity. Today, we're going to hopefully you walk away with a build awareness of United Way's economic opportunity impact focus area, and to hear from two of our community experts, Jane Graupman, International Institute of Minnesota, and then Shana Ford, Center for Economic Inclusion, Vice President of Partnerships and Programs. So some of you have seen this slide before. It talks a little bit more about our vision and what we hope for the Twin Cities. Whereas a region where all thrive regardless of income, place, or race. We work with our community partners to identify the greatest needs and how we can work to disrupt the systems of inequities that lead to those. We do that by focusing on outcomes based in equity that address economic opportunity, educational success, and household stability. We use the unique position of United Way in the community to do this through capacity building, grant making, impact measurement, and system change work. Uh-oh. Just kidding. Okay. Our economic opportunity vision is that all adults have the opportunity to participate in the workforce and advance toward prosperity and wealth building. We envision a robust network of training, employment, and financial health, support for low-income job seekers to meet their diverse interests, skills, and needs. We support 24 nonprofit organizations working on economic opportunity in the Twin Cities. And those three intended outcomes we seek to advance in our community are participants increase knowledge and skills for employment, participants advance in their career or career pathway, and then individuals increase their net worth. So that is our vision. And now I'm excited to talk a little bit more with our community experts and where you can see our vision come through their work. So Jane Graupman is a graduate of the University of Minnesota, earning her BA in Organizational Communications. Jane is the Executive Director of International Institute of Minnesota, a nonprofit organization that provides comprehensive services to new Americans. During her 28 years with the Institute, she has been instrumental in creating a national recognized career pathways, and a top-performing refugee resettlement department and anti-trafficking services that help new Americans maximize their talent and become fully contributing members of American society. Please welcome Jane. Shana Ford is a purpose-driven executive with over 20 years of experience leading highly effective teams to achieve performance success. As Vice President for the Center of Economic Inclusion, Shana leads their team in supporting public and private institutions in assessing systems for racial equity, economic impact, policies and practices that are responsive to the talent and needs and assets of people of color. Shana holds a bachelor's degree in business and marketing management and is currently working toward a master's degree in leadership. Please welcome Shana. So I first wanted you all to be able to introduce yourself, your role, and then what brought you to the economic opportunity field.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. You're too loudly. So I just want to say thanks first to everyone for being here. I really appreciate you taking time from your day to be here. So yeah, I'm the Executive Director at the International Institute of Minnesota, and we work exclusively with new Americans in our community. So that means immigrants and refugees that are coming to the United States and to Minnesota. So some of those folks have been in the country for a day, meaning we're picking them up at the airport. They've just arrived to Minnesota. That's the first time stepping foot on American soil. And that's through our refugee resettlement program where we have a formal contract with the State Department. And then some of them have been here for 5 years, some of them for 15 years. So there's really a range of time that people have been in the country. And of course that really, the services that those folks need and are availing themselves to really vary also, right? So some of them are coming for the first time to learn English, and some of them are coming back to get their master's in nursing. So there's really a variety of services and folks that we're serving. So the reason that I got in this field is I grew up in a small town, I'm coming from a big family, and I started my first job when I was 10 and a half, babysitting 4 kids. And kind of worked and know the value of making money. And I just started that at a young age. It meant a lot to me to learn like how to manage my money. And then of course, as you get older, I mean, everyone has to work. And so it's very important. And it's one of the most important things that we do at the Institute. We have very broad service, but everyone coming through our doors needs a job. And that's really, people are preoccupied with that. I think contrary to a lot of what you hear, newly arrived immigrants and refugees to our state and any state have to go to work almost immediately, and they do. So and that is just important for their economic growth in our country, in our state, but it's also really important for them then to keep moving on that path. And because a lot of times they're getting their first job when they walk through the door, but they need to advance in those careers. But the other side of it that I love about this work is that it is, the folks that we're working with are a huge resource for our state. So we want to make sure that anyone that comes through the threshold of the International Institute of Minnesota is getting what they need from us and the opportunity to maximize their talent. And we don't want to waste any human potential in our organization. And people come with goals, very specific goals, and they come with a lot of dreams and ambitions, and we don't want to be standing in the way of that. We want to be opening up those doors with that for them.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yes. All right. Thank you again for coming out. I echo everything that Jane said, and also want to extend my thanks to Tiffany for inviting me. It's funny because I'm sitting here and I'm seeing my name on the screen, and behind it says community expert, and I've been on the job for 2 months. So I'm an aspiring community expert, I'll say that. Again, my name is Shana Ford. I'm the Vice President of Programs for the Center of Economic Inclusion. And in my role there, I have the very unique and privileged opportunity to work alongside with Tawana Black. First of all, that's just a whole course of work in itself. She has a wealth of knowledge and experiences in this space that every meeting and every opportunity I walk alongside of her, I learn something new. So I hope to share some of those things with you today. Coupled with that, what I do in my day job is I am actually helping to build a business model. And in that business model, we are looking to go into the public and the private sector and help employers understand where there may be racial biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious, in their practices. We often focus on talent recruitment and attraction, but it really will help us on both sides of the talent systems. So bringing talent in, promoting talent, developing talent, measuring their performance in culturally affirming ways, and then also making sure that we retain that talent. And so the model that we're building is really fun, it's innovative, but the impact to the economy is going to be huge. The question is what brought me into this work. It's funny you should say that or ask that question. Recently, we were at one of our speaker series, and at the end there was a Q&A, and there was a young lady who stood up and asked the question, why is it so hard for people of color to navigate here in Minnesota? And I was listening to her as she talked about her journey from Guatemala to Minnesota. She came here for love and not for work. And she talked about how it was hard to establish authentic relationships, to know where to go to get authentic food, and to go and see other people of color and not be isolated in Minnesota. And all the while I'm sitting there thinking, I'm a native Minnesotan and I've been waiting for you to get here. Because being a native Minnesotan, we have this unfortunate reputation that we're nice but not friendly. There's not very many people of color from Minnesota, and we don't welcome other people from other states that are of color or not of color. And so that really drew me into this work because it's an opportunity to impact my home state, my region. It's an opportunity to be on a platform where I can make an impact so that when people of color come to the state of Minnesota, they will see the better side of who we are.
Thank you so much for that. What does economic opportunity mean for your organization?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. So I think where I would start is with another story. So at the Center of Economic Inclusion, I started leading a convening of leaders across multiple industries to solve a very specific problem. And the specific problem is that women with children who were looking to enter into the tech industry would start this comprehensive training on a pathway to more income, but would fall off within 2 to 4 weeks of the training program because they didn't have access to childcare. So this specific organization reached out to me, and I pulled in some experts from the childcare finance area, which was also one of my former employers. So I was able to pull some people together, and we started working on this issue. In our last meeting, I thought I would be clever and start off with a very important data point. And that data point was that in the state of Minnesota, we have closed the wealth gap 1% in the last 10 years. And their reaction to that data point threw me. They said, quote, "Wow, what a way to down the conversation. What a way to start a great Friday meeting. Shana, you're Debbie Downer." And I thought, oh no, that wasn't my intention of sharing that with you. I was sharing it with you because if we're really gonna make an economic impact and create economic opportunity, we have to think about more than just jobs. We have to think about more than just income, but we also have to make sure that we're constantly creating pathways to wealth. And so I didn't say that in the meeting, of course, but after I processed, I thought, how do I create a platform so that whenever I am interacting with groups of people, specifically leaders, that we're not just thinking about one thing in a laser focus, getting women with children access to childcare so they can start a job, or getting women with children into the tech industry so that they can have a sustainable wage. By the way, this sustainable wage that they're going for is about $40,000 a year. And the reason I brought all those people to the table is because the cost of childcare is about $20,000 a year. So now we're double burdening them just to bring them to the workforce. And all the while I'm thinking, how do we get to wealth creation? So my new theme is to think about how do we do things in multiple ways, not just singularly where we're solving one problem, but how do we do this on multiple levels at the same time? That's fine.
So when I started at the Institute almost 30 years ago, the folks that were coming to the Institute were, at that time, the majority of people that we were serving were refugees, and now we serve more immigrants than we do refugees just because our work has grown. And when I started almost 30 years ago, the people that were walking through our doors were living in refugee camps for 2 years. It was about the average for the first 5 years I was there. And then that period of time started to grow, and it got longer and longer. And now the folks that are coming through our doors, many of them have, if they're refugees, almost all of them, have been living in refugee camps for 2 decades. So that means that their children were born in camps, and they've spent a lot of significant part of their adulthood with their parents in camps. And the impact that has on people's life, I can't even explain. It's very, very profound. So people's mental health, people's physical health, people's access to education. But I also want to say the other remarkable thing other than that fact is, what just continually surprises me is how resourceful people are. And they leave the camps and try to find resources in schools for their kids, which is not easy to do. But they come now speaking English more than they ever have, which I still don't quite know how that happens. But so again, I think we take that very seriously at the Institute. When people have lost 2 decades of their lives, when they come to the Institute, we cannot mess around. We have to have services that move their lives forward. And, a big part of that is education and workforce. People, as I said, people are thinking about how am I going to support my family in this country. It's a whole new landscape for people. The landscape can be very confusing with a lot of mixed messages. And as Shana said, Minnesota is, I think we're doing a much better job than we were doing 30 years ago when I started. It's very hard to kind of break into certain industries to get them to hire new Americans. People are really afraid of people's accents. That was really a barrier. I think that's still true to some degree, but I think we have made some progress. There's definitely still a ways to go. But I think, we're in this because we want people have a lot of goals when they come to the Institute, and they want to see those actualized. So our big challenge in this work is helping people move up into jobs, as Shana said, that can sustain their families. And I think just a shout out for the United Way, because we've been working with that United Way supports our medical careers pathway and supports our hospitality pathway, and that's a newer pathway. But they've been supporting our medical careers pathway for 30 years. And what that's helped us do is to build up that pathway so that we're able to move people out of entry-level jobs. Most of them are nursing assistants. We've employed 2,200 people over 2,200 people as nursing assistants, and we've helped now almost over 500 of them become nurses. And we have very talented people, very smart people as coming through our doors, and we don't want to waste that talent. And as you know, the huge labor projections in our state are very serious. And we need all the talent that we have in our state, and we need to make sure that everybody has the opportunity they can. So I think, the United Way, I just was thinking about this, and actually, thinking about my remarks here today is the United Way, everybody has been talking about innovation for the last, 10 years. That's not anything new. But 20 years ago, the United Way had an innovation grant, and that helped us to think about how do we help move people out of nursing assistant jobs into nursing jobs. And they gave us the opportunity to do that. So now people, the average wage for a nursing assistant now is $15 an hour, which has actually come a long way. And there's benefits, so that's good. But as Shana said, that isn't going to support a family. So helping people move into an RN position that can pay $30 or more an hour is helping people to get to an income that they actually can support their family. And it's great because we have a lot of people where the husband or the wife started, and the husband or wife comes in, and we have 2 income earners in the family, and then that can really help people pay for childcare, transportation that they need. So that's a long answer, but it's very exciting to see that work, to see people who are new to a country, a culture, and it's a lot to navigate, and then to see them take those steps to keep moving forward. It's very exciting.
Thank you. So what would you say is the current state of Twin Cities, and where are the gaps? And a lot of times, and you kind of mentioned or alluded to this already, but is it only about getting people employed?
Yeah, great question, Tiffany. So when I contemplated this question, I thought about starting on the national level and just focusing on the data point that 90% of the growth in the 10 largest cities have come from communities of color. There's many studies out there. I think McKinsey has a study out there right now about the wealth gap here in Minnesota and how that is having a long-term economic impact on our region. Basically, it's starting we're leaving money on the table because we are not investing enough in people of color in those communities when it gets to wealth. And so what happens as a result of that is people of color are getting jobs, yes, but they are still cost burdened by rent. They're still homeless. They're still below wage. It's still taking them longer than 4 years to get their college degree. I'm one of those people, so I can attest to that those pathways are still not clear. And it's going to take the leadership in this region and each and every one of us to open those doors. When I think about it on a local level, The Center for Economic Inclusion, in partnership with the Brookings Institute, has done a wonderful job of developing the 14 economic indicators that talk about specifically here in Minnesota. To learn more about those, you can visit our website, and I did bring some pamphlets in the back if you want to look at those indicators. But the ones that I spend a lot of time on right now in my 2 months on the job, and I'm really learning about what I'm doing, is, you look at the economic indicators, and it is just absolutely mind-blowing a number of people in our region who are the working poor. And what does that look like? And so these are current gaps that we're all still faced with, and we need to work on. Another one is, again, cost of living by rent. As we know, the real estate market in Minnesota is changing. We've got some gentrification going on, and as a result of that, the push out is happening. And so the rent is high and the income is low, and trying to make ends meet and make the decision, are you going to pay rent or are you going to feed your family? So these are some real gaps that we have to start thinking about. And then after spending 20 plus years in the financial services industry, one that still blows my mind is around the bank lending to small businesses. Again, this is how we get to wealth creation and making those critical linkages between employers and minority business entrepreneurs so that we can, again, create those pathways to wealth. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, a strong economy, we have to have a strong economy in our state, we have to make sure that everybody has a place in our economy. And 97% of the new workers in 2016 and 2017 that were entering our labor market were new Americans or foreign born. So, and I think, again, to just repeat that, if we're not looking at the low-income workers in our state and what we can do to help people move forward, and it's not even just about social service support. I mean, there are real systems barriers that if you're not doing this work, you just don't know about. In the work that we're doing to help people move them into higher paying jobs, a lot of our folks are going to two-year community colleges. And there's a system of remedial education there that people get tracked into. And most of those folks are new Americans and people of color and low-income people. And if they get put in the system called developmental education, they don't get out of it. And it's a real serious issue in Minnesota and in our country, because what happens is we have a lot of clients that we send who want to be nurses. And if they get put in, all the national research shows us, in the system of developmental education, which is remedial reading and writing, people don't get out of that system. 20% of people actually leave those classes, those remedial classes. And if they do leave them, if they're fortunate to leave them, they don't graduate from college. And to give you an example, we had a student who came to the Institute who had 59 credits of developmental education, so developmental reading and writing and math. And that means she spent $10,000 of her Pell Grant, so more than half of her Pell Grant. And she didn't know why she was in the classes. The credits that she was paying for do not go toward her college degree. They're meaningless credits. And she wants to be a nurse. So we were able to get her out of those classes, into her pathway to be a nurse. But if someone hadn't intervened and she hadn't come to us, she would have just been languishing there. And this is happening all over the state, all over the country, and it is it's really, to be kind, unfortunate, because it's derailing people from moving into the jobs that they can do. And these classes, most people don't need to even be in these classes, because all the research shows if they just go into their nursing program or their IT program, they did what all of us did that went to college. They make up for skills that they don't have. And so I'm talking a lot about this to people, and it's just such an example. I always think if I wasn't doing this work, I think a lot of people think, well, why don't low-income people pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and why aren't they moving forward, and why are they staying in this low-income position that they're in? And this is just one of 10 examples that we both could give you of why people can't. I mean, there's really true barriers to that are no fault. People are showing up to college, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and there's just pitfalls, and that's just one of the many that we see. So, and I think one thing that's really positive, and you can talk about this a lot more than I can, Shana, but I think we are starting to change the way we talk about the people that we serve, and that's very important. Our students at 1 year, and again, United Way made us track this. We're like, what? We didn't have the staff to do that. But about more than 5 years ago, they asked us to track 1 year retention and 2 year retention rates for all the folks that we employ. And it's really great that they did that because we found out at 1 year of working, and the 2 year data is about the same, 94% of our students were still employed in healthcare. And in long-term care, it's an industry that has like 70% turnover. So it just really changed the way we talk about our work, because the employers are not doing us a favor by hiring our graduates. They're actually changing their business model and really giving better care for the elders in our community, because people are staying in those jobs, they're very loyal. They come from cultures that really respect elders, and so they're just really, they're fantastic employees from a data perspective, from a performance perspective. So I think that conversation that the Center for Economic Inclusion really started in United Way, asked all of its providers what are you doing for your equity planning? How are you talking about your clients? And that's really important for all of us in our community, pushing ourselves on that front.
So what do you see as the biggest area of improvement in our community?
Yeah, I think it's just what I talked about. I really do feel like, I don't know, I feel hopeful that maybe my daughter's lifetime, we won't have to all be sitting in this room talking about equity, that actually maybe something will change. It's just tiresome to be having this conversation for so long. And I just hope that, I think the word is really getting out, and you can probably speak to this better than I can, but I do feel like employers I'm talking to are thinking about equity, they're thinking about responding to people in their workforce differently, and it's just so important for our state and for our country. I mean, from a humanitarian standpoint, but also from an economic one. And I think that I'm hopeful that maybe we'll start to see some actual change.
Yeah, so when I think about the biggest areas that we've made improvement on, it is with opportunity for employment. There are jobs available, and again, we're talking about jobs, income, and wealth. So the opportunities that I'm speaking on are in the jobs arena. Unemployment is down, and one of our initiatives that we work on, my colleague is in the room, who leads that initiative, is North at Work, and many of you are probably familiar with that. And we recently had the opportunity to celebrate that. We have put more than 200 men to work at North Minneapolis. And while there are still barriers and challenges that we link arms with other community partners to remove those barriers, the opportunity for employment is there. I would also like to link that with the fact that in the state of Minnesota, we have more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any other state. So opportunity is plentiful. And we've done that well, and we've done that right. The work will be to capitalize on that opportunity for all, so that we have shared prosperity, and we have not just jobs, but we have income that is sustainable for families. And put a pin in that for just a second and a sidestep and talk about a conversation I had with a colleague around family sustainability. One of the things when we're shaping the narrative, which we are working really hard to do that at the Center of Economic Inclusion, and is actually one of our strategic imperatives, is that we often want to determine what that family sustainable wage is by a number. And I'll say it's $16 an hour, which I've heard in my 2 months, or I've heard $40,000 a year, which I've heard in my 2 months. But that family sustainable wage is based upon 2.5 people in the household. Well, how common is that? One. Two, where is that common, because where you're geographically located makes a huge difference. And then three, the cost of childcare, the cost of transportation, the cost of housing, all of those things are really hard to attain in our great state of opportunity on $40,000 a year. So the family sustainable wage is something that can't be a one size fits all. It cannot be something that we just say, if you're at $40,000, we get it, that's the win. One of the things that I talk about with my colleagues at the center quite often is we have an ethos in Minnesota when it comes to economic opportunity, and that ethos is if we get to the win, then we'll create change. And I strongly feel like we need to change that ethos. The ethos is change equals the win. And so we have to change from just opportunity to greater pathways and also to shared accountability.
Awesome, thank you. Anthony said that I need to use this mic. But that's also not working either, so I'll just So, thank you so much for that. How does United Way, I know you both kind of talked a little bit more about that, but what does that look like, and how does that support that partnership play into solving some of these issues that you already talked about?
Yeah, so I think this is the perfect opportunity to give a wholehearted thanks to the United Way as a funding partner for the Center for Economic Inclusion. But to be specific about where that help is going, it's in building this model that I have been working on for 2 months, but glad to say we're about 85% of the way there. And the model is built on 5 pillars, and the pillars are employer inclusion, inclusive growth, leadership deep dive, learning events, and then a turnaround strategy. And the reason why there are 5 pillars is when we look at the landscape that the model would serve, there's a very broad spectrum of employers that would take advantage of this model. Starting in quadrant 1, where we have employers that are just starting the work of racial equity and inclusion. They're thinking about it, they're hearing the terms out here, and they want to get engaged with it. They may have some of their talent indicators that are starting to point south, and they're saying, we may need a little bit of help. All the way to the other end of the spectrum, where we have large corporations, organizations, and also public sector that are deep into the work of racial equity, but need help with their equity plans and need help with extracting those unconscious biases that are built into their systems that none of us here in this room build, but also have to be part of the solution to dismantle them. And so that model crosses all spectrums. The 2 employers that we will work with will be both in the private and the public sector. We're trying to figure out our sweet spot and where we want to launch, but we feel really good about the opportunity to go in and work alongside with employers for not a short period of time, because we know, again, change is not the win. Change is the win, and in order to do that, we need to be in there for a longer period of time. So we're looking for the model to have us do an implementation phase of about a year long with each employer that we work with. And we wouldn't be able to do that without partners like the Greater Twin Cities of the United Way, so thank you.
I think there's many things I can say to this question, but one thing in our work right now, it's a pretty rough time. There's a lot of negative talk about immigrants in our community, and it really impacts staff morale, but it really impacts our clients. And so I would say I've never seen the fear that I'm seeing right now in the immigrant and new American community. People that are here in legal status are afraid to avail themselves of services. They're not signing up for programs that they can sign up for that are going to help them and their children. That kind of fear is really, really hard to see. And how that relates to the United Way is I feel like when we talk to them, they get that. They're paying attention to that. So there's things that are always changing in our work and in the climate and the political climate and the philanthropy climate. And it's great to have a funder that gets what's happening what are the important issues of our time, they're paying attention to that, so that I don't have to explain that to them, they get it, so that's really important, and they have, if we say there's really a barrier we need, they're open to listening to that. I think also, I say this about the United Way all the time because it's really true. I give to the United Way, and because I've done this work for a long time, and it's really important that funders understand who they're funding, and that are they actually making impact for the people that they're serving. And so, it's not always about data, but it is often about data. I mean, we have to be held to the fact, we have to be doing what we're supposed to be doing for our clients and be able to show that. And so the United Way, I feel like I work with a lot of funders, and their staff really understand our work. They know what we're doing, they know what we're not doing, and they're asking us about that. And it's having an expert in the organization that's actually tracking the work that we're doing. So what is the money that they're investing in the Institute, what is that doing? And that's really important. And I think, as I said, for our Medical Careers Pathway, they funded that program for 30 years, and they should, because it's getting really stellar outcomes. That's a long time for a funder to stay with you, and that's very, very unusual. It's very hard to find funders a lot of funders say they want outcomes, they want you to measure your outcomes, and they want to make sure you're reaching those outcomes. But it doesn't mean if you have really fantastic outcomes that they necessarily stay with you. And that's really hard to find. And if funders aren't going to fund that work, then who is? And how are we going to provide that service for people? So that's really, really important. And again, it's not that easy to find. So I think the other thing is they give us the opportunity to showcase our work and talk to all of you about the work we're doing, which we really appreciate. And again, I'm just going to say it again, but they are very focused on equity in the community and really leading that work and making sure that we're doing the same in our organizations.
So if asked, what are some key messaging could you provide to this audience, especially when people ask, why should I hear about this issue? Or what can I do?
I think it's really simple. In a way it's simple. If nothing else, we all care about the economic future of our state and for our kids and for our community. So, if we want to have a strong future, we have to have workers that are educated, and we have to have all of them. We cannot be leaving anyone behind. And if people can't get around that from just a human decency standpoint, they need to get around it from an economic one, because it is a huge problem. And I've heard, I was at the Federal Reserve a bit ago, and there were 3 economists, one from the University of Minnesota and the Dakotas, and they said there's 2 options to our future of our economy. Either Minnesotans have a lot more babies, which they didn't feel very hopeful about, and or we have new Americans and immigrants come and join in bigger numbers in Minnesota, and we invest in the people that aren't maximizing their potential.
Yeah, so I would say employment must change in Minnesota. The thing that I think is really prevailing is the talent iceberg. We knew it was coming, and it's upon us. I've heard we have 228,000 jobs that will be open by the year 2024, and the talent pool will be changing to 70 to 80% people of color and indigenous people, coupled with augmentation and automation of jobs. Employment must change. And so the way we do that is through tools and practices that dismantle exclusion and institutionalize inclusion.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. We're going to open it up to questions. And Anthony or Steve has microphones that come across or come to you.
One, just thank you all for being here, but to think about some of the things that you are saying, like we have communities that are living in hardship, the intersectionalities of some of the barriers that are obstacles that they face, the lack of investment in some of these PLCI or immigrant communities, and thinking about some of those solutions or the pieces that you are thinking about. But like having workers that are educated in how their employment must change, or at least some of the tools and practices. What are some things that you all are doing or you have seen for individuals who are like working to help authenticate some of that informal work experience or informal education experience that is outside of maybe post-secondary education, or people having, those real live job experiences, but, they might be going and doing some translation at their parent-teacher conference or things like that. How are you all kind of like authenticating that so employers are seeing that as an investment, as well as the employees themselves are seeing that as a resource or a tool that they have?
Yeah, I think that's really valid and fair. And so when I talk about employment changing, it's around the arena, and I think you'll see more of it in the workspace, is that there used to be the standard, a 4-year degree is required. And when we go to work with employers, that's one of the first questions we ask. What is it about this position that requires a 4-year degree? And then you'll further read down the job description and it'll say master's degree preferred. And what employers unintentionally didn't realize is that would scare off a lot of potential employees. It would dwindle your talent pool quickly because if I didn't have a master's degree, it would seem as though I wasn't going to be a top candidate all the way. That's what that can translate to. And so using alternative ways to really bring up the talent qualifications, certifications, and experiences is to be able to open the eyes of employers that if we have people in the candidate pool that are translating for other people, that is a real skill. And it's a skill that's going to be needed in the employment space now and in the future. And so if it isn't on a resume, how do you ask job questions in the interview to find out those hidden skills and experiences that you're referencing? As well as relying more on certifications. In the tech industry, which is one of the fastest growing industries in Minnesota, that certification is absolutely key and critical, and so the more certifications you have can equal to a 4-year degree or even a master's. So it's drawing those things out, but opening the eyes of the employment change and working with employers to have the skills to do that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Till from the Family Partnership, and about a week ago I was at a national convening that Aspen Institute brought together on family prosperity, and about the 1% closure of the racial wealth gap in 10 years and the perception that that's a downer message. One of the interesting things that was shared at the convening was that whites across the country think there is no racial wealth gap, that there used to be, but that doesn't exist anymore. So I'm wondering what you're thinking about strategies that we can use to close that gap in perceptions between European Americans and people of color.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. I just had a conversation with Shana Black, my boss and the CEO of the Center of Economic Inclusion. And the way she described that to me, I think really opened my eyes. And that is oftentimes people who have wealth confuse wealth and income. And so income is totally different than wealth. And so while people of color and indigenous people and people from underserved communities are getting jobs, and some of us are even getting higher income, that path to wealth creation is very slim and narrow. And so starting there with clearly defining the difference between the two, and just really having authentic conversations about what does wealth look like. Is wealth, I came from the financial services industry. And we used to define wealth as $250,000 of investable assets, excluding the home. Raise your hand if you have that. Well, there we go.
I think one other thing is that we're trying to, at the Institute, and I think it's, all of us need to do this, is spread the word. And we had there's so much learning people need, and we had a forum on racism in real estate, and it was shocking, the things that I learned. And, you know, just about how not so long ago, and there was a list of people, and it was very specific. And of course, African Americans, Turks, Jews, I mean, just this long list of like 20 different groups that could not own homes in Minneapolis. And, you know, I mean, and just the detail of this piece of this language from the city, I mean, it was just so disturbing, but just how detailed and the impact that has on communities. And most people don't know that. So I think it's hard work and it takes time, it doesn't happen overnight. But I think any chance we have to talk about that and explain to people, because white people don't know that, they don't. And people in my family don't know that, friends, feel like people are learning that, and some people just don't want to know it and they're not opening into the message. But you have to start giving people facts about that. And I think for all nonprofits and people in the community and all of you that are sure volunteers, and we have to start educating people because it's such a lack of, there's such a lack of education. And the good news is there's so many great books out now, people talking about that. And it's really important that we spread the word about that.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Rios. I have a question about opportunity, because that's what equity is supposed to be about. And one of the things that I've had trouble with, they call me a felon, but I used to be a felon. I'm not a felon anymore, but that's because they use that against me, even after I've changed. But that hasn't stopped me. I work for that council now, and I'm doing good. And I've got my equipment, I've got everything ready to do video. So my question is, where do you go get opportunity like that? I mean, it just seems that, I don't know, that's been kind of I mean, I built my company to a certain point, now I'm in a roadblock. So how do we go and look for, I'm not looking for money, I'm looking for work.
That's an excellent question, Gabriel, and I would say my reaction to that is there are many barriers that we all face, and some of us start off with strikes against us. I'm not a felon, but I'm a single parent that raised 5 kids by herself. And I worked alongside my white counterparts in banking, and I saw how their 401k was growing and mine was getting depleted because I had to use it to pay for childcare. And so then to launch from my career in banking and move into other areas to expand my experiences, I hit many roadblocks. And my reaction to that is there are going to be roadblocks, but what I've learned to do is you have to get the right information in order to go around them. And that information comes from being in circles like this. Because someone in the room after this conference or after this meeting is going to come up to you and they're going to say, hey, try this. And the key is try it. That's the key, is just keep trying it.
Thank you all for being here today. I just wanted to ask, because I can definitely relate with being a single mom, working in the financial industry, and really trying to continue my education while doing all these things and growing my career. How do you guys engage with our education system? Because I heard you guys talk about it somewhat, and I heard you guys talk about how you engage with employers on changing why does this job require this 4-year degree? What about the education system and the policies and procedures around us having to appeal about everything? There's always a decision made, and I always feel like I have to appeal every small little itty bitty decision because they have a lot of roadblocks that are put in place and the policies that I feel like don't make sense anymore.
It's absolutely true, and I only know about it through the experience of working with our clients. And there are so many barriers in higher education. It's just, it keeps me, literally, I'm not just saying this, it keeps me awake at night. It really bothers me a lot. I mean, it's very sad to see people, I mean, we have had so many clients who are intellectually, motivationally, completely ready to move on with their careers and advance their education. And they're getting stuck in these systems through no fault of their own. We've had to advocate, our staff have had to advocate for people who have teachers that just say blatantly racist things in classrooms that it just, you can't believe. And I'm not saying that it's definitely not everyone, but I think the other thing is when I talk to colleges, who is in your classroom? So we're advocates for New Americans, and we teach English classes, our staff are expert in that, and they love doing it, that's why they do it. And when you go to colleges and you see half of their classroom is New Americans, and I ask the teachers, how has that impacted your teaching? How has that changed your teaching? And people look at you like they've never thought of that question before. And these are, this isn't the K-12 system, these are people paying for their education. And it's taxpayer money, it's their time. And it is a huge problem when people get up the courage to make it to a college and make it to the classroom, and it is not easy to figure out and navigate those systems. And then they get themselves to the classroom, and you don't have teachers that are responsive. You cannot keep teaching the same way. And just because you're a college teacher doesn't mean that you don't have to change your teaching style. These are your customers. They are paying your salary. So everybody has to hold them accountable. And we're, as you can hear, I'm getting more and more and more outspoken about this because in some cases it's criminal what's happening. So you're absolutely right. We are working on this DevEd system, which is huge. We're also working with systems colleges that our students come back and say, why is this happening to me in my class and not to other people? And just listening, sorting out why that is. I mean, we're trying to be fair and hear both sides. But there are issues in higher education and they need to change. And there's no excuse why they're not. Because again, the people in those classrooms are paying for that education. It's not free for them. And people in those institutions need to be responsive. And they need to care about why the passing rates in their classes and in these institutions are not higher.
So I also wanted to respond to your question, and that is writing rebuttals is a skill. And so write them and keep writing them because you will be able to use that skill to overcome barriers, to find ways to fill in gaps when you are in your job. Your employer will look at that and say, wow, nothing stops her and she can overcome it and she can write really well. And then carry that forward and share that with someone else. So if you have to write a rebuttal for the same policy and you find out someone else had to write a rebuttal for that same policy, then you join forces and get the juice and change it. Because that is the only way it's gonna stop. Those barriers are there intentionally. And so the only way they're gonna come down is through intention. So keep writing.
Awesome.
Just a quick aside, as a former adjunct instructor, I would suggest thinking more about the administration of universities who are paying their adjuncts $5,000 a class as opposed to
That's a big problem too.
not just the teachers themselves, but that's an aside. My question is,
that's
as the person who's paying $5,000 for a class, a lot of times.
No, it's a big issue.
The question I have is, you guys are working a lot in the career pathways model, and that's really awesome, and it seems like you're doing great work. But as we talk more about what's getting left behind, a lot of people that are getting left behind are, say, people with severe mental illness or people with disabilities who are never going to necessarily get into that career pathways model. And it seems like a lot of the priority in this conversation about equity are asking for, not just getting people to nursing assistant jobs, but like getting them into nursing school. And I'm wondering, where's the place for, say, an individual placement model, which is where you put someone in a job immediately and then figure out the career track afterwards, because it seems like that's not what people are looking to fund right now.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for your statement, and that is a big issue, and I want to be clear, I'm not talking just that there are very good teachers in schools. It's really more of a system issue in schools, of systems that they've used in the past that aren't working. So thank you for saying that. And I think, yeah, a lot of what we do at the Institute is place people in their first job. And you're right, it is hard to get it funded. I think people are using the language now about on-ramps. I know United Way is about on-ramps to a career pathway. So, as I said, people have to get a first job, and it's often not the job they want. It's not their dream job. But they have to work and build skills, and then we just want to make sure they can know that they can come back and know that the opportunities exist within our pathway or other pathways at other nonprofits in the community. But yeah, no, it's hard to get funded. And basic needs support also is hard to get funded for those folks too that are new to the country or people that need that support. It's also really hard to get funded, so we're grateful that United Way funds that work also.
Thank you. I'm so excited for you two to join me this afternoon. So please say thank you. They're going to hang around for a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to Olivia Jefferson, Director of Holistic Grant Making and Equity.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. We hope that you are leaving inspired, that you learned something, and then also we have a call to action. So we don't want you to just leave here just listening. We want you to be able to participate and do something with us. So there's many ways for you to get involved with United Way. One of them is obviously to volunteer, but also, which you cannot see, there are links here to help you think about how to advocate with us as we continue to do this work and really try to expand that in our community. Also volunteering, we have a very robust volunteer opportunity here at United Way, and we'd love for you to join us in that. Also join the giving community. We are really excited about the giving communities that we have. They're very focused, but they also make such a huge impact in our community. And then finally, of course, make a gift. Organizations like this are fantastic, and we are so excited that we get to fund this work, but also just be partners with you all. So I truly want to say thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Thank you. That means a lot to us that you would come out today. And thank you all so much for being our audience members. But again, it doesn't stop here. We have to continue fighting together to eliminate the disparities that we see in our community. So thank you, and we wish you a great day.